Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Dream Big podcast with Bob Goff and friends. I'm here with Bob Goff.
Hi, everybody. Here we are again. I love this part of the week where we get to sit down among friends and have a quick conversation.
So we had Ed in the actual live studio a few weeks ago. And tell us about Ed. Some people don't know who he is by name, but they definitely know who he is by the sound.
Yeah, he's a guy, Carrie Underwood. Has a lead guitarist, and that's Ed. And it was just so fun to hear him talk about his ambitions, and then it was really fun to see him up on the stage doing his thing, just melting people's faces.
Yeah.
But he's such there's juxtaposing this like calm, fun, cool guy,
Right.
and then he just gets a Stratocaster in his hands and just goes off. So I think you're really going to enjoy listening to Ed. He's been a friend for years. He's taken me on adventures, but he's just another kind soul that you ought to hear from. So Ed, thanks so much for making time to come in.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
I was just trying to think back about where we met first, but that's not jumping to mind, but I'm just so glad we did. And we've just stayed in touch.
It's been great.
Having a couple faithful friends. And that's one thing about you. Like you just show up. Like I would say, if there was a phrase or a slogan, and I think that's something that's important to you, the whole idea of showing up.
Absolutely. Show up is really, it's the running theme of my house, right? For even for my family, it's show up. It's showing up for everything that excites you, everything that's scary for you, when you feel intimidated, feel pressure up against you. We just continue to show up.
Yeah,
So, very passionate about it. Yeah.
Somehow it's not just being in proximity to other people, but actually being present. So showing up isn't just getting to the right geography. It's almost like a road mapping of your heart to say, I want to be available to what is right here for me. And tell us a little bit about how that worked itself out for you. I know you're playing guitar a lot, but tell us, for the people that haven't met you before, what was one of your ambitions and how did you show up to it?
Yeah. Well, for me, showing up started when I was a kid, about playing guitar and just having that passion. And something inside of me just knew at a young age that this is something that I really wanted to do. And so one of the things that I would do as a kid is I've always been an observer, right? I've always observed people. So I would watch guitar teachers, for example, right? And I would watch these guys and I would think, why is this guy not playing in a big arena somewhere? Why is he not in a big famous band, right? This is a 13-year-old kid wondering these thoughts. And I would look at these guys and I would start to identify what I perceived as maybe why they weren't in these big famous bands, why they were teaching me guitar instead of doing something at a global scale, And so one of the things that I recognized was that I realized that maybe they weren't willing to show up for this dream that they had inside, right? Maybe they weren't willing to go to where the opportunities were to go build those relationships, to leave their comfort zone, what was comfortable for them. And I think, so I just kind of took that as a mental note, said, okay, when I'm older, I'm going to make it a point to not do what they did and go show up to these places and the things that are scary for me and to put myself out there.
So what's the next waypoint? You know how to play guitar.
Yep.
You're good at it. Had you always wanted to be out on big stages?
Always.
Always.
When I was a kid, I would watch MTV. I mean, I would set my alarm for when the new videos were coming out, like, for some, oh
Really?
man, I was hooked. So I would watch, and so for me, I'd see the big, the live concert, like the live video, the guys out there, slow motion slinging their hair or whatever in the bus shot, and, people rolling off in the tour bus to their arenas. And I was mesmerized by it. Like, I was completely mesmerized. A lot of people say, I got into music for girls. That's a common thing you hear people say. For me, it was like, I just saw the people on the buses, and I knew that's what I want to do someday.
Okay, so
Yeah.
at a young age, you identified
Yeah.
that, and the people that are listening, they have ambitions, whether it's to melt people's faces with a Stratocaster or to show up and plant a community garden.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, it's like take your ambition and go land this thing. Like,
Yeah.
what are the next steps? So for you, what was the next step? You met some people that seemed to have a similar ambition, but maybe hadn't shown up fully. What did you decide to do?
One of the parts about showing up is sometimes we put ourselves out there and it doesn't go the way that we hope, right? It doesn't, like maybe it's just flat out bad. It's embarrassing, right? And so being able to overcome the failure and then showing up again. For example, like my first gig when I was, 19 years old. I'm living in Texas, and I want to be this. I'm a rock kid, right? I want to play arenas every night in a big rock band. So everything I'm doing is working to become that guy. So I get a call to play in a country band, and I don't want to play in a country band, but I also know that the only way to make money playing guitar in Texas is playing in a country band. So I want to make money for the obvious reason. So I say yes to this gig. I start preparing for my first country gig, and at 19, I never had to learn 30 or 40 songs before, and only have 3 days to learn them. So the only way that I could be ready was to write charts. Now today I'm more experienced and I write charts on a big piece of paper with Sharpies, and I can see that chart wherever I put it. But back then, out of inexperience, or I didn't want people to think I was cheating, I wrote all my charts on a little notepad.
Oh, no.
And instead of writing everything
Like microfiche.
yes. And instead of writing everything to Sharpie, I wrote it in a pen. Okay. Because that's the only way I could get everything to fit on this little notepad. So I throw this notepad on the stage, and the stage, when I get up there to play, it's super dark and it's smoky in there, right? And so the drummer, he counts off the first song, and he goes 3, 4, and I lean in, I look down at my chart, and I can't see what I'm supposed to play. It was a disaster. I mean, I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this song? And then how am I going to get through the other 30, 40 songs for the rest of the night, right? Like, how's this going to
Yeah.
happen? And by the way, like I'm this rock guitar player guy. I've never played country licks before, and it was a complete disaster. Like I was humiliated. And so during the break, I went and sat out in the car with my brother, and I was kind of just complaining to him, more crying, I think, about how humiliated I was on the stage, And my brother, he convinced me that it wasn't as bad as I thought that it was, And so
Wouldn't that great to have a good friend?
sometimes older brothers come through for you, right?
Sometimes
Yeah,
all that
yeah,
fighting
yeah,
results in somebody that
yeah,
can say true words over you.
yeah, that's right. He actually said, Ed, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as you think. I said, all right, Matt or Dan, I'll take you up on it. I'll take your word on that. So I went back in there and I finished that show. But my point of that story is that today, that failure it literally is one of the top defining moments of my career.
Isn't that interesting? And so you're going to walk out on a whole bunch of stages in this tour that you're on right now, and to not be stuck, but to instead learn. Landing the plane
Mhm.
means learning from these things that have happened before, have them inform your ambition rather than scuttle your dreams. Sometimes people have something go wrong like that, and they'll say, I'm just going to make smoothies the rest of my life. But for somehow you were able to dig down, and sometimes God will just send the right person to
Mhm.
say the right word. And we get to be that person for people. We get to say,
Absolutely.
let's swing for the fences again. Let's try. When was it that you felt like this ambition started actually picking up some momentum? Is there a particular turning point for you?
Um, uh, Honestly, I think that the turning point came from me really when I finally surrendered everything over to God.
How so?
Well, at the time, because I moved to Nashville, I was putting in the time and putting in the struggle. But as I'm a struggling musician and I'm working in a coffee shop, and my wife, she's miserable at her job. And one day I told her, I said, why don't you just stay home? Life's too short, and I'll figure out how to get it done. And so she went for it. She quit. So now I'm this guy who's just married to this pretty girl, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it music and work in a coffee shop, and take care of my quote unquote family at the time. So, but this traction really, really never took off until I finally got to a point where God really started pressing into me, and for me at that particular time, what was happening was God was stirring something inside of me about starting a family, and I really resisted him and I fought him on that because I thought
Really?
yeah, well, it
Because you're
makes
such a family guy.
well,
My
because
whole experience with you in our friendship has been you're like Mr. Family. You're making videos of, hey, boys, here's how you do falconry. And another time you're sitting down with the guy that like invented Buck's knives. I guess
yeah,
his name is Buck.
Chuck Buck, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
I'm like,
Who knew there was a guy?
I want to have
Yeah.
another kid just to
Yeah,
name them
yeah,
Chuck Buck.
That's right.
But one of the things that
Mm.
you were saying is that you resisted that. Where did
Mhm.
that come from?
Yeah, well, I think it was part of that thing was part it was a couple of things, but one of the things was the guitar teachers, right? So the 13-year-old me says, "Okay, here's what these guys why is this person famous or not famous? Why is this person successful or quote unquote successful or not successful?" One of the things was they're not showing up for their dream and going and pursuing it. The other one was I equated getting married that they got married and had families and settled down. So I equated in my mind that starting a family meant giving up your dreams.
Isn't that
Mhm.
interesting? And
Yeah.
so, for each of us, we have
Mhm.
these things. We've been talking about it earlier in the podcast as limiting beliefs.
Correct.
You have this thing that, Goths aren't good at whatever, fill in the blank, whatever limiting belief, if you're listening, that you've been. So somebody spoke something over you, you bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Mhm.
And then it started, this 13-year-old started pushing around the 19-year-old. Isn't
That's
that
right.
crazy?
Yeah. Well, at this point, I'm 20 something. I'm in my 20s.
Yeah.
So what for 10 years I've been having this thought of family and yeah, family means
Equals
giving up a
selling
dream
out.
equals
Yeah.
selling out.
Interesting.
Um, so yeah, so so when I finally got to a place of just surrendering, saying, "Okay, God, I believe that you are doing something. I believe you're calling me towards something, and I believe that you have a plan for me, and that's whatever that looks like. I'm just going to go for it." And so when I finally surrendered all of what I wanted to do, that's when the traction really started to happen for my career. And
Is
that's exactly. I mean, that's it.
isn't that crazy how you can have these things that are equally important coexist together?
Hmm.
Sometimes we think it's binary, that it's all
Absolutely.
just zeros and ones and you have to pick this or that, when actually you can pick both. I met your family, you have an awesome family, you've been able to have that dream coexist with the
Absolutely.
other one.
Yeah.
S-
And I think you're. And I'm sorry. And you're right. I think you hit on it, which is th- w- the internal dialogue that we all tell ourselves. Right. That's the hard. That's that's the hard part to overcome, to land the plane or to show up. Right. It's that thing that somebody has told you. Right. It's that lie that you tell yourself. I'll tell you. I mean, there's 1,000 guitar players out there better than I am, hands down, right? There's 1,000 guitar players just as deserving or more deserving than I am to play the kinds of gigs that I get to play. A lot of these guys though don't get to do what I get to do for a living. Um, but what I'm really good at, what I'm really good at is standing up to those lies, right? Because even at the level that I perform at, I still have the same, not the same, but I still have insecurity and fears that still creep up, right?
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
When you walk out on some pretty big stages, how do you deal with insecurities and fears and saying, "I wonder if it's going to be like that dark, smoky room
Mhm.
where I had like a big fine point and charts I couldn't see anymore." How
Yeah.
do you deal with that?
So the way that I deal with it, there's a couple things that I do. One is I try and speak truth over that lie, right? So for me the lie might be, w- what if when the camera rolls and say we're on the Grammys, right? What if when I step out to take that big solo, I forget what I'm supposed to play, right? Like that would be that's a real thought. And so for me, I have to speak a truth over that lie. So otherwise, because that lie becomes all consuming, and I will step out and I'll play, and I may not miss the notes, but I won't perform at the best at a high level. It'll be a scared, tense performance for
And
me,
how do you
right?
speak a truth of it? Are you actually
I
verbalizing it?
verbally speak truth over the lie.
Well,
So
what do you
from
give me an
so all
example?
right, here's the example. All right, so it might be, what if I get out there and I forget what I'm supposed to play during the solo? The truth, I have a phrase. I call it the phrase that slays. Right? I literally. So my phrase is no way. Right? So what if I get out there and I forget? I say no way, no way. Because every time that I've done the work, I always get out there and I perform. Or every time I get out there, it comes out the way that I practiced. Right? Or another one might be no way, because I know that when I'm under pressure, I always execute, right? And so I kind of go back into my memory bank and I find the truths to what those lies are, and I speak that truth over that lie.
It's worth pausing there for a second if you're listening to think you have these ambitions, and then you also have what we've been calling limiting beliefs, something that just it's this lie over you that you're not good enough, you're not dashing enough, you're not whatever enough. But to figure out what those are so you can speak truth over them. The problem for some of us is that there's just so many and they're so general and vague, but we need to call them out by name. And so I'll just give you something really practical. Go out to coffee, uh, say, I want 3 minutes of vulnerability with a good friend. And your friend's job is just to listen, not to fix it, not to say you're wrong about that. That's not true. Just listen, say what the lie has been, and then speak a truth over that.
Hmm.
And if we got it's like carving a new little groove in your brain, but there's something beautiful about saying that. I'll call Sweet Maria when I'm going to be in a place, I'm going to say something or do something and just go like, wow, I just think this is where the wheels fall off this time. I think I may have just reached a little bit too far. And she doesn't try to fix it. She doesn't say, don't feel that. She doesn't say, she just goes like, wow, that just, are you feeling all alone in that? I'm like, I'm feeling all alone in it until you ask me that. Now I'm not feeling all alone. So something,
Yeah.
there's just a beauty in making these things known. Landing the plane means making these things known and then taking the next courageous step.
Yeah.
What for you have been some words that have been spoken over you by people, things that you've learned that have been really helpful? Because I want to give a practical suggestions for some of the people listening. Have there been people that have said things to you that really resonated to you?
My wife, sh- she's definitely Gretchen. She's definitely the that person who speaks a lot of truth, over those lies, and exactly like Sweet Maria, right? Oftentimes, it's not that she's trying to fix it. She's not saying things like, "Oh, you're crazy. Don't think about that," right? But sometimes it's just it is those little things like I'm just trying to think of. All right, perfect example, right? I get one of my first big breaks, right? I go into a rehearsal room in Nashville. This was the band that's had sold several million records. Okay, I walk into this rehearsal. I lay all my stuff out nice and neat on the floor, and I plug in and we start playing, and it's going not good, and it's beginning to feel like that first country gig all over again, right? Now, fast forward, this is now one of my first big country gigs. But prior to this, I'm back to being rock guy. I go out to the hallway, I'll call my wife, and like you said, like maybe I reach a little too far, right? I called her and said, it's not going well. Maybe I should just pack my things up and go. And she said, Ed, I'm sure it's better than you think it's going, right? You hear this common theme, right? It's probably not as bad as you think. And she just encouraged me to go back in there. A month later, I was the band leader, right? It's like those are the things that we land the plane on those insecurities and those fears and those thoughts like that. Like when we press and we push through them. All of a sudden, you're the band leader when you just wanted to go home, right? You thought there's no way that I could ever be this. That I could. There's no way that I can pull this off. I'm consistently walking into things where I think I don't know if I can pull this off. You may do the same thing, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I've learned a lot from is when Maria, I'll ask her like, "How's it going?" and she'll actually confirm that it's not going well.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be like, I was emceeing some event. I've only done it once ever because it went so poorly. I leaned over to you halfway through this. I go like, this is front of uh 3,500 people in Washington, D.C. And I leaned over to her and I said, this isn't going well, is it? And she said, this is not going well. And so, and indeed, she nailed it like a bot. It just actually, there's nothing redeeming, nothing very cool happened other than realizing that I'm actually not very good at that. I'm okay at a couple things, but being the MC of an event where other people um, are involved in other things. I just can't reel it
But
in.
but if you had not landed the plane on that idea, right? Like if someone said, "Hey, Bob, will you MC this?" And you're like, "Sure, I'll MC it." If you had not done that, you wouldn't. You've learned something about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Which is, and it's okay. It's
Just
okay to
say
go
no.
do it. But it's okay to show up for this thing that maybe is intimidating and maybe it doesn't go well. And it's okay to be in that moment and realize maybe, maybe, maybe this isn't my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But there's discernment in figuring out, is this not my wheelhouse or is this not good because this is new to me, right?
Yes.
Oftentimes, more times than not, it's not good because this is new to me, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking about Evel Knievel, how he got paid for the attempts, not the results.
There you go. Exactly. So let me circle back around. So what have people spoken over me? I won't go into some of those things, but I will say this. For me, I literally have taken the time to write down lies on a piece of paper.
Good for
Okay.
you.
So literally, let's say that if there's something that I want to do, or there's several things that I want to do, and I'm hearing those lies, I've actually taken the time to get out a sheet of paper and write down each of those lies. Okay. And on the other side, so I do the paper in half. So one half of the paper is the lies. The other half of the paper, I write down the truths. Right. So I take the time to find the truth over that lie. So now when that lie creeps up, I have the truth. Not only do I have the truth, the words to say, but I've identified internally what that truth is.
Yeah.
And
So good. And if faith is important to you, then you can say some of these things that were promises that God gave us.
absolutely, I've
But he
done it many
says, like,
times.
you're the son of a king, and that we don't need to impress God by these successes, but we impress him with our faithfulness, that we think that there are things that we're going to do and we're going to give it 100%. I gave 100% of my emceeing abilities that that evening, and I think that if we had some people that continue to remind us of who we are, that will be really grounding. So part of landing the plane is finding a couple good friends that will just show up for you. I had a 60th birthday, and I walked into a room stunned at people that had come so far, and then I see you, a guy you got so many other things to be doing than flying to San Diego. But the whole idea of showing up is a consistency, an availability, a predictability over years and years and years. And so landing the plane would be establishing that kind of consistency and predictability in your interactions with the people that are closest to you, with your family, with your circle of friends. And so I wouldn't just affirm landing the plane is showing up. What's something you're dreaming about right now? What's something that's out ahead of you? As I'm thinking, we're going to go do something tomorrow together, which will be kind of fun. I teach a class at Pepperdine Law School on failure, and I'm bringing my co-professor, Ed Eason, with me. Put that on your resume.
Is that what we're talking about tomorrow?
Law professor. Yeah, so we'll just talk about, because law school typically for most people is all about like win, win, win. And this is a top 50 in the world law school. And I've been teaching for almost a decade, a class on what do you do when you lose? What happens when the wheels fall off? That's where all the good stuff happens.
I think it's brilliant to have a class like that.
Yeah, where we can get real about these things. And you could say, what's the lie? And because you're not a screw up just because you screwed up. That happened. What's the truth? I'm actually a person on the way. I'm daring. I'm willing to take risks. I'm willing to be misunderstood. If there is a lie that is printed about you, to say, I'm not here to get my validation from other people. I'm getting my validation from Christ. And to find these things that have been spoken over you and to find some truth. And there's a difference between blowing sunshine at somebody and telling them the truth. Blowing sunshine is you're so swell. Telling them the truth is I've seen you fly across the country to show up. You're that guy. And that has a transformative effect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think huge power in what you're doing for those guys and girls.
You got to come with me. I'm teaching a class at San Quentin Prison. That's the other place I teach this failure class. But there we talk about not only the failures, but they're aware of those. We talk about getting clarity. on what you're going to make out of what happened. And when every time I go, it's not to teach, it's to learn. And I'm hearing from some really humble guys. I think we're there in another week to be with these guys, and they are our teachers. So if you're driving in traffic right now, if you're listening at home, think landing the plane means showing up. What's a practical way you can show up? Maybe for somebody else that's in a difficult circumstance. What are people who are people who've shown up for you? And is there a way to say thank you? And I want to say to you, Ed, thank you. Thanks for just being a guy that's willing to show up. You're going to go play on a huge stage. And I call up and say, you want to do a podcast? You'll be like, sure. I'm on the way over. And you've got everything except your electric guitar in tow. But that whole idea of you live in constant anticipation. I love that about you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know what? I'd have to say, I think I probably, a lot of that's you rubbing off on me. You know, I think one of the things, one of the mantras, one of the other sayings at my house, right? We've got show up, right? That's a big one. And the other is if one of my boys wants to do something, or somebody, a neighbor or somebody wants us to do something that maybe I'd rather not. My wife will look at me, Gretchen. She'll say, Ed, love does. I'm like, you're right. Okay, love does. So we're going to do it. So that's another thing, right? It's like, yeah. So I would say a lot of that is being around you and learning, right? You've been a great teacher for those sorts of ideas and thoughts and loving people, you know, so thank you.
Wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, take some time, reflect on what's your next step towards your ambition, show up for that, to say, well, what's the next way I can really be fully present for this thing? Encircle yourself with people that will speak words of truth over you. Get the pen out, divide the paper in half. What's the lie? What's the truth of that? We're going to kind of move those things. If we can speak truth over that, then land the plane.
Yeah. And you speak that truth the whole way while you're landing it, because those thoughts don't just happen once, right? It's not like, am I going to crash the plane? Am I going to, and you speak the truth over it. The lie is, am I going to crash the plane? The truth, you speak the truth. The lie creeps up again, and the lie just keeps, right? It's like a record, right? And that groove, because you hit on it a second ago, right? It's like it's like a record. We're digging this groove, and it's just this loop that's just playing in our mind, and landing the plane is speaking that truth over and over and over until you finally get it on the ground.
I like your idea of flying the plane all the way to the ground. Up in Canada, we've got these, we fly float planes. And when it's turbulent, you know where the water is because there's ripple on it. But when it's glassy, it's hard to know where the water is. And what you need to do is just get the attitude of the plane right, and then just fly it all the way down onto the water. And you actually will only know you're at the water when you feel a little bump. You'd be like, the surprise. And so whether you're in a turbulent time right now listening, whether you're in a time where there's a lot of calm and peace, just kind of fly that thing. Just say, what's the next step? How am I going to get this thing on the water? That's where beautiful things will happen. Ed, thank you so much for making some time to talk. I can't wait to see you melting faces up on the stage here shortly. And I really can't wait to see you inspire a ton of law students in saying, what's your ambition, and go after it. And if you've got an ambition that is to change the world, because I know your ambitions are to bring people joy. Those are the kind of ambitions worth every single effort. If the ambition is to get a condo and a convertible, you're going to get the condo and the sink's going to leak, the convertible is going to get a rip in it. But if your ambitions are the ones that are really worth pursuing, whether it's up in front of a lot of people or just with the person that you love the most, take the next step.
If you've been sitting on a big dream of yours for quite a while, now just might be your moment. We put together a workbook for you this month in honor of the last stage of the Dream Big framework called Land the Plane. Go to the show notes, download it, and get to work finally landing the plane to your big dreams. This is your moment. Also, coming up November 11th and 12th, a Dream Big Live workshop in Bob's hometown in San Diego. Come spend 2 days investing in your big dreams. Allow Bob to be your guide to go from idea to launch. Also, December 2nd through 4th, Dream Big Live Workshop in Hawaii. Go to the website, find out more about those 2 live workshop opportunities for you, dreambigframework.com. I know listening to your conversation with Ed, as an artist, he talked a lot about the lies that prevent us from actually landing the plane of our dreams. And I love hearing how you have to name those lies, like look them in the face and actually see if there's truth there or not.
Yeah, call it out. When I went over to see Ed, he gave me this like ticket, and evidently there's 4 kinds of tickets you can get for the concert in this big Coliseum. The first one gets you up into the nosebleed section, which is actually pretty cool. Like you can look down on what's happening. The second one gets you on the floor.
Oh.
The third one gets you inside this like mosh pit. But the 4th kind is all access, right? And you can go back to where our friends are. And so when I think about our ambitions, sometimes we think we got the nosebleed section.
Yeah.
We think the ticket is that. Or we think, well, if we could just get somewhere on the ground floor of this, but you don't even think about getting in the mosh pit. But I think what God gives us oftentimes is a really unique ambition and a ticket that says you get all access. And if we really believe that was true, that we could like live into that we could reach out to people thinking you have all access to whoever you want to call, that you have all access to the resources that you need to get there, and that you have all access to the courage that it'll take to move from just thinking about this ambition to actually doing this ambition. And no better teacher than Ed.
The only way to really see what kind of ticket you have is just to go up to the guy at security. You got to test it. You got to see, is this
what
the right
does this one do?
Right, yeah. Turn around.
And they just keep saying, oh yeah, you can go there.
Come on in.
Like, really?
Yeah. And that's really the part of that dream big, the land the plane part. You won't know if you have what it takes until you actually do the thing.
Yeah, get out of the stands, get onto the field. Some things have happened to you. They've happened to me too. That doesn't make me or you a victim. It makes us a participant. And to say, okay, so what's this participant going to do next? I'm going to go wherever that pass will let me in.
Yeah. And there might be some people on the way who say, you actually don't have access here, but they're wrong.
Yeah,
they're just
actually,
not right.
I mean, you don't need to challenge that by raising your voice. But just raise your awareness to say, oh, wow, there'll be a couple impediments along the way. I'm going to just push through them.
So as you're listening to this and you're feeling that you can tell the resistance, you can tell the insecurities that you have, the fears. This is your word for you. You have what it takes. You have permission. You have the full access.
Yeah, see you backstage.
Yep.